Everyone has an opinion about millennials and money. They're lazy, they're entitled, they killed chain restaurants and department stores, and the concept of saving. You've heard it 1,000 times. But here's what nobody actually explains. Millennials are the most financially educated generation in history, and also the most financially anxious. They know more about index funds, compound interest, and tax-advantaged accounts than any generation before them, and somehow they still feel like they're losing. That's not a contradiction, that's a symptom, and it all traces back to one specific moment that rewired how an entire generation thinks about money forever. Picture this. It's 2005. You're 22 years old, you just graduated college. You did everything right, studied hard, got the degree, took on the debt because everyone said it was worth it. Good investment in yourself, that's what they called it. You walk into your first real job interview in a blazer you bought on a credit card. The offer comes in, $32,000 a year. Your student loans are $400 a month. You do the math and something doesn't add up, but everyone around you says this is normal. This is just how it works. Pay your dues, give it time, the formula still works. Then 2008 hits. You're 25, you've been paying dues for 3 years, your entry-level job just evaporated, your slightly older coworkers, the ones with mortgages, are filing for foreclosure, and the news is explaining calmly that the entire financial system was built on a fiction. The formula wasn't just hard, it was broken. And that single realization shaped every money decision millennials would make for the next 2 decades. Here's the first weird thing about millennial money psychology. They're the most likely generation to invest and also the most likely to keep a secret cash account their partner doesn't know about. A 2023 Bankrate study found 29% of millennials maintain hidden savings separate from joint accounts. Financial therapists call this financial self-preservation mode. It's not dishonesty. It's what happens when you grew up watching households collapse overnight and decided you needed a private exit strategy. They trust their partners. They just don't trust the situation. Let's talk about something that confuses older financial advisors endlessly. Millennials won't buy extended warranties, won't pay for cable, will spend 3 hours researching the cheapest flight, but they'll pay $15 a month for an app that tells them their credit's for, and another $10 for a budgeting app, and another $12 for a financial newsletter. Deloitte research found millennials spend more on financial information products than any other generation, while also being the most skeptical of traditional financial advice. They don't trust advisors, but they're addicted to financial content. Here's why. It's 2011. You're 28. You're trying to figure out how to start a Roth IRA. You call a financial advisor. He spends 45 minutes trying to sell you a whole life insurance policy you don't need. You never call again. But you find a podcast that explains index funds in plain English, a Reddit thread that breaks down tax strategy like a conversation between friends. Suddenly, information feels safe. Advisors feel like a trap. So they consume obsessively and trust selectively. They're not financially illiterate, they're financially self-taught by necessity. Here's something that genuinely baffles economists. Millennials have lower home ownership rates than any previous generation at the same age. They're described constantly as refusing to buy. But per capita, they're the largest generation of landlords under 40. They're not anti-real estate, they're anti-mortgage at any cost. They watched their parents' net worth disappear when home values crashed. They watched equity become a punchline. So they'll buy a duplex and rent out half of it. They'll house hack. They'll co-invest with a sibling. They want the asset without the single point of failure. It's not avoidance, it's redesigning the bet. Now here's where millennial money psychology gets genuinely fascinating. They're the generation most likely to have a detailed 5-year financial plan, spreadsheets, projections, fire calculators, the works, and also the most likely to abandon that same plan entirely after a personal crisis. Fidelity found millennials have the highest rate of 401k hardship withdrawals of any generation. They plan for everything and still raid the emergency fund. The psychology here is real and it's painful. When you've seen systems fail catastrophically, you plan obsessively because anxiety demands it. But you also never fully believe the plan will work. So when life gets hard, the plan feels less like a promise and more like a suggestion. They're not bad at discipline, they're exhausted from planning in a world that keeps changing the rules. One last thing that looks irresponsible, but is actually something entirely different. Millennials spend more on therapy than any previous generation. The American Psychological Association found millennials are twice as likely as boomers to have seen a therapist, and a significant portion cite financial stress as the primary reason. On the surface, that looks like spending money to feel bad about spending money. But here's the reframe. Every generation before them dealt with financial anxiety through avoidance. Didn't talk about money, didn't think about money, just worked and hoped. Millennials are the first generation to treat financial trauma like actual trauma, to recognize that the anxiety isn't a character flaw, it's a rational response to an irrational system. They're not spending on therapy instead of investing. They're spending on therapy so the anxiety doesn't blow up the investments. So here's what millennial money psychology is actually telling us. They're not broke because they're irresponsible. They're navigating an economy that handed them historically high debt, historically low entry wages, 2 major financial crises before age 35, and a housing market that priced them out. And they're doing it with spreadsheets and podcasts and a stubbornness that looks a lot like resilience. Remember that 22-year-old in the blazer bought on credit in 2005? They learned the formula, they followed the formula, they watched the formula fail. So now they're building their own formulas. And honestly, given everything they've lived through, that's exactly what you'd do too. If this resonated, drop a comment about a money habit you have that you've never been able to fully explain. Chances are it traces back to something specific. And if you want more of the psychology behind why we do what we do with money, subscribe. The next one goes even deeper. Your financial habits aren't random. They're a map of everything the economy put you through.
Your financial habits aren't a reflection of your character, they're a record of the world you survived. And the fact that you're still here, still planning, still trying, is the only proof of resilience that actually matters.